right, so our satin stitch. So I'm going to demonstrate the satin stitch in 6 strands. You can definitely experiment with different strand numbers. I highly recommend doing like a 2, 3, 4, 6 different sections, but these lines are actually here to help you keep your satin stitch straight. So I'll explain to you why. So with a satin stitch, we're just creating a series of straight stitches all in a row to fill an area. So one of the things I like to do is when I first stitch down, making sure that all my stitches are laying flat. And one of the ways I do that is sometimes running my needle underneath just to give them, even them all out. And then the biggest thing is keeping your stitches all on the same angle from one side to the other of a space. So any space you're doing, you're gonna wanna be on the same angle by the time you get from one side to the other. And what tends to happen is by the time we get, if we're going side by side by side, by the time we get to here, we've potentially changed our angle and we're not quite even. So splitting these sections into smaller sections is one of the tricks to keeping a more even space. And once you've split them, you can just keep splitting the spaces over and over and over again until you fill them. So that is how I typically do my satin stitches. You can go, once you've filled it to a small enough space, you can go side by side. I do a little bit more random than that, and it's not necessarily organized, but it works well for me. Another option for how I keep my lines straight is I will pull my thread onto the angle I want it on and push my needle down just underneath where that line goes, which keeps me on the right angle. And then I just normally keep splitting my sections. And especially once the sections get smaller and smaller, it's really easy to keep them on the right angle because I can see I basically need to go directly in the middle of this to fill this space. And then you just keep filling each section until you've filled all of them. So filling with 6 strands is obviously the fastest way to fill these, but it's not always the smoothest. The less strands you work with, the more ability you have to be very precise in your satin stitch. The stitches will lay flatter and they'll sit a little bit easier for you to manage. When you have all 6 strands, you can sometimes have strands that are like twisted or strands that just aren't sitting where they're supposed to. That is why you'll see me pulling the whole strand out. Sometimes I untwist it before I lay them down. But you'll see that I can see right here, this one's a little twisted over top. So my trick, and it works, it's just if you're working with less strands, you probably have to do less of this. I just normally I'm holding the thread at the back of my fabric and pulling it down and just untwisting it. So one other thing to watch is where you're ending your stitch here. As we can see, I've gone too short on this one and they don't all even out. So as much as you're trying to keep them even in this direction, you're also trying to keep the ends even here. So you're looking to see sort of where you went in, and that's actually along a weave. So all fabric has a weave, which is where you've gone between the crosses of the threads that create the fabric. So if you can find the same, being on the same weave for each stitch, you're going to end up much more level. This one you can visibly see how I've gone too short, and keeping this all on the same weave is what's going to keep your space from being, or your satin stitch from being very straight across. So not only are you wanting to keep it straight on your lines, you're also wanting to keep it straight on where you're entering and exiting. Your thread is entering and exiting. And that's again why splitting those sections can make it easier. Right, so hopefully all of those tips will help you. You can finish the rest of your sections And you can experiment with different ways to do that. Like I was saying about the weave, one of the other things that you can do to keep your lines straight is to follow the weave down your fabric as well as across your fabric when you're finding your entry and exit point. So if I'm going to look on this, I can see that there's a straight line down my fabric, and I can follow that weave and enter. And as we can see, I've twisted my threads again. All right, so I will let you work on that and sort of decide how much you want to experiment with different strands, or experiment with splitting it or trying to go side by side. This is sort of where you learn what technique you like the best for completing your satin stitch, and I can just guide you on different tips, and you can take what you like and leave what you don't. So finishing up your satin stitch, and I'll meet you on for our next stitch.